My greedy sister married my husband, certain she'd inherit his $400 million fortune. Days later, he died suddenly. After the funeral, she claimed she was the rightful heir, but when the lawyer read the will, the truth left her completely speechless. The lawyer said my name, not Vanessa's, mine. In a room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, with 8 people around a polished walnut table, and my sister sitting at the head of it in a black Chanel suit with her legs crossed and her phone face up, and her entire life already mentally rearranged around the fortune she had spent 18 months engineering. The lawyer said my name, Emily Hartwell, my former name. The name I had quietly, painfully, legally relinquished 4 months ago when the divorce was finalized, and I had stood in a courthouse hallway and understood that some things, once given away, cannot be reclaimed. Apparently, Daniel had other ideas. I watched the color leave my sister's face. I watched it happen in sequence. The cheeks first, then the area around her mouth, then something behind the eyes going flat and cold and furious in a way that her carefully assembled expression couldn't entirely contain. I watched her fingers curl around the edge of the table the way fingers curl when a person needs to hold on to something because the ground has just moved. I did not feel triumphant. I felt something quieter than that, something that had been building for 18 months and had no clean name. Not quite grief, not quite relief, not quite justice. Something that lived in the space between all three, in the place where you put the things that are too complicated to feel all the way. Vanessa's mouth opened. Once, twice, nothing came out. For the first time in her entire life, my sister had absolutely nothing to say. Let me tell you about Vanessa first, because she deserves to be understood before she's dismissed. Vanessa Cole, now Vanessa Hartwell for whatever that's worth, is 2 years younger than me and has always operated on the assumption that the world was arranged incorrectly, that things which were mine had been allocated by some cosmic clerical error and required correction. This started small. My clothes, borrowed without asking, and returned damaged or not at all. My friends, charmed and gradually annexed. My spotlight at family gatherings, stolen with the particular skill of someone who has learned to make theft look like natural magnetism. She was never cruel about it. That's the thing that made it so difficult to name. She was warm and funny and genuinely likable. And the taking was always done with such easy grace that anyone watching would have found it hard to locate the exact moment where warmth became calculation. I spent 33 years locating it. I know precisely where it lives. I met Daniel Hartwell at a tech conference 7 years ago. He was 35, building a logistics software company on what he described as optimism, ramen, and the refusal to look at my bank balance. He was funny and messy and completely committed to a thing he believed in, and I fell for him the way you fall for someone who is still, at 35, genuinely surprised by their own potential, not with the glamorous certainty of someone who has always known they would succeed, but with the daily, grinding, faith-based effort of someone who simply hasn't stopped yet. We dated for 2 years and married in a small ceremony at a vineyard in Sonoma. Not the expensive Napa kind, the modest Sonoma kind. 40 guests and a food truck and fairy lights strung between oak trees. We ate takeout on a secondhand couch in an apartment that was too small and had a parking situation I will not describe because it still gives me stress symptoms. We talked about the company constantly. Investor decks and market positioning and the specific, relentless emotional labor of asking people to believe in something they can't see yet. I believed in it. I believed in him. Then the company went public. $412 million on a Thursday afternoon in October, and by Friday morning, Daniel Hartwell was a different kind of person to everyone who had previously found him easy to overlook. Not to me. He was still the man who made the same joke every time he burned the toast, who kept a running list of books he meant to read and never read them, who called his mother every Sunday without fail. Still him, but to everyone else, different. Vanessa noticed. She started coming around more. That was the first thing. The frequency shifted. Dinners that had been occasional became regular. Calls that had been monthly became weekly. She had always had a talent for proximity, for engineering situations in which she was simply present, and she deployed it with the particular focus of someone who has identified a target. I noticed it at a dinner party in January, 8 months after the IPO. Vanessa was on Daniel's left. I was across the table, managing a conversation with his business partner's wife. I watched Vanessa lean toward him, the specific lean of someone who wants to create a bubble, a private space within the public gathering, and say something that made him laugh, not his polite laugh, the real one. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself she was my sister and he was my husband, and I had built 9 years of something with this man, and I was not going to be the kind of woman who was threatened by her own family. I was wrong to tell myself that. The red flags accumulated in the way they always do, not dramatically, not in ways that announce themselves, but quietly, in the background, the way mold accumulates before you can see it. Daniel started mentioning Vanessa in contexts that didn't require her mention. Vanessa was saying something interesting about that. Vanessa thinks we should, and then a trail off, a recalibration, the brief awareness of someone who has said something slightly more than they intended. Vanessa started texting him. About what? I didn't know. I saw the name on the screen once when he left his phone on the counter and didn't volunteer anything, and I didn't ask because I was 34 years old, and I refused to be the person who checked their husband's phone. I refused. I should have looked. The thing that nobody tells you about slow betrayals is that they don't hurt the way you think they'll hurt. There's no single moment where the pain arrives and locates itself and can be addressed. It's diffuse, spreading. The particular ache of something you know know but haven't yet allowed yourself to know, living in your chest like a bruise that only hurts when pressed. I pressed it finally on a Saturday in April when Daniel came home from a dinner I hadn't been invited to. A small group, he'd said, work people, he'd said. And I looked at him across our marble kitchen island, and something about the quality of his distance told me that the dinner had included Vanessa, and that the work people were a partial accounting at best. I asked him directly. He said yes, she'd been there. It wasn't a big deal. I said, Daniel, look at me. He looked at me. He couldn't hold it. That was the moment I knew. Not the words. The moment his eyes moved away from mine before they should have. The involuntary admission of a man who has been carrying something and is tired of carrying it, but doesn't know yet how to put it down. We talked for 3 hours that night, or we tried to talk. What we actually did was circle the thing, approach it, retreat from it, and ultimately arrive at an agreement that we needed time and space, and possibly a therapist. And Daniel called Dr. Lawrence Chen, couples counselor, 17 years in practice, who had been recommended by 2 of our friends, and made an appointment for the following Thursday. We went twice. The third Thursday, Daniel sat at the kitchen island and said, I'm not happy. That was the whole explanation. I want to be honest about what came next, because I've been dishonest about it for a year and a half, to myself more than to anyone else. I was devastated. Clinically, actually, Dr. Sarah Park, therapist, 14 years in practice, whom I found through Dr. Chen's referral after Daniel moved out, told me at our third session that the word grief was not hyperbolic in this context, that the loss of a marriage is a loss, with stages and symptoms and a timeline that doesn't defer to dignity. I was not dignified. For about 6 weeks, I was the least dignified version of myself I have ever been. Then I got up, I hired my own attorney, a family law specialist named Richard Okoye, 20 years of practice, who had seen the full range of how marriages end and who treated my situation with the specific brisk compassion of someone who understands that the goal is not to feel better immediately, but to be positioned well for what comes after. The divorce was finalized in September. We had no children. The financial settlement reflected the fact that I had contributed to the company's early years in ways that weren't on a balance sheet, but were documented in Richard's careful accounting. My income during the lean years, the specific ways I had subsidized the company's survival, the record of a partnership that the IPO had made invisible, but that had been genuinely real. Daniel was fair. I want to say that. Whatever happened between us, whatever choices he made, he was fair in the settlement in a way that he didn't have to be. Richard said this was unusual, and I said I knew and I didn't say anything else about it. 3 months after the divorce, my sister married him in Napa. Ivory gown, fitted, plunging neckline. I saw the photos because a mutual friend, not understanding that I did not want to see them, sent them to me on a Tuesday morning with a message that said simply, saw this. I'm so sorry. Vanessa was glowing. She had always wanted what was mine. This was her masterpiece. I looked at the photos for approximately 90 seconds. Then I put my phone face down and I went to work. 9 days. That's how long Vanessa was Mrs. Daniel Hartwell before he was gone. He was 42 years old. A heart attack, sudden, no prior cardiac history that anyone knew of, the kind of event that arrives without announcement and leaves nothing behind it but the specific, stunned disbelief of everyone who understood him to be a person who would simply keep existing. I found out through Richard Okoye, who heard through a colleague who had been Daniel's corporate attorney, who called him as a professional courtesy. Richard called me at 7:14 in the morning. I sat on the edge of my bed and looked at the wall. I had been divorced from this man for 4 months. I had spent 6 weeks not being dignified, and then I had gotten up and rebuilt something, and I had not contacted him, and he had not contacted me, and we had arranged, tacitly and thoroughly, to become people who had once known each other very well and now occupied separate lives. He was 42 years old, gone, just like that. Vanessa appeared outside the hospital before the news was public. I know this because 3 people told me, independently, that she had been photographed arriving at the hospital entrance in oversized sunglasses and black silk at a time that would have required extraordinary advanced knowledge for someone who claimed to have received the same call as everyone else. I noted that. I stored it. I did not yet know what to do with it. At the funeral, she moved through the chapel with the particular ease of a woman who has organized her grief into a performance and is delivering it with skill. Black dress, perfect fit, tears that arrived and departed with a timing that I found myself studying from the back row, where I had taken a seat I had not been offered but had claimed anyway, because Daniel had been my husband for 7 years, and I was not going to be managed out of the room where people said goodbye to him. She spotted me. For a moment, her face was exactly itself, stripped of the performance, showing me what was underneath, which was not grief, but something colder and more alert. Then the performance resumed. She came to me afterward, one manicured hand on my arm, the sympathy voice, warm, practiced, pitched for the benefit of anyone in earshot. Emily, I know this must be difficult for you. Her perfume was the kind that cost more than my first car. I'll make sure you're taken care of, she said. I'm generous like that. I looked at her for a moment. You always did love the spotlight, I said. Her smile tightened like a fist. 1 week later, the offices of Whitmore and Keller occupied the 32nd floor of a building on Fifth Avenue, and the view from the conference room, floor-to-ceiling windows, Central Park below, the particular November light that makes Manhattan look like it was designed for a film, was the kind of view that is meant to establish something, to say before anyone speaks, the things that happen in this room are consequential. I arrived 5 minutes early because Richard Okoye, who was sitting beside me, had told me to arrive 5 minutes early, and I was taking following all of his instructions with complete seriousness. Vanessa arrived exactly on time, which with her meant 3 minutes late. She had an attorney of her own, Marcus Webb, whose name Richard had given me 2 days earlier, with an expression that communicated both recognition and something more complicated. Webb was known, Richard told me, for aggressive estate litigation, for the kind of practice that treated wills as starting positions rather than conclusions. Vanessa sat at the head of the table. She sat there with the natural ease of someone who has decided where she belongs and is not available for argument about it. Legs crossed, heels tapping a slow, impatient rhythm against the chair leg, her phone face up on the table, scrolled through, set down, scrolled through again. The performance of someone whose time is valuable and who wants the room to understand this. "Let's get this over with," she said, before Mr. Whitmore had fully settled into his chair. "I have meetings." Arthur Whitmore, senior partner, 40 years of estate law, silver-haired, with the particular stillness of a man who has been in rooms like this many times and has learned that stillness is its own kind of authority, adjusted his glasses. He began with the charitable bequests, hospital endowments, veteran service organizations, bonuses to long-term staff named individually, with specific amounts that made several people in the room look quietly moved. Vanessa barely blinked. Marcus Webb took notes. Then Mr. Whitmore paused. He opened a different folder. "There is a personal letter," he said, "to be read into the record." Vanessa's head came up slightly. The heel tapping stopped. "Daniel was always sentimental," she said, lightly, the tone of a woman who is confident in the outcome and can afford to be gracious about the decorative elements. Mr. Whitmore unfolded a single sheet of paper. The paper was slightly uneven, not the crisp, formal stationery of a legal document, but something more personal. I could see from where I sat that the handwriting was Daniel's. He cleared his throat. "To my wife." "Yes, my wife, though the law may disagree." Vanessa straightened. "Excuse me?" He did not look up. "My marriage at the end of my life was a mistake I recognized too late. Entered under deception, pressure, and what I can only describe as a sustained and deliberate campaign conducted by a person I trusted because she was family to the woman I loved." Her hand came down on the table. "This is outrageous." "Please," Mr. Whitmore said. His voice did not change register by a single degree. "Allow me to finish." Marcus Webb put his hand on Vanessa's arm. She shook it off. Mr. Whitmore continued. "To my former wife, the only person who ever loved me when I had nothing, who believed in something I hadn't yet earned the right to believe in myself, I owe the truth and I owe protection. I should have protected her better when I was alive. I am doing what I can from here." The room was very quiet. Every head turned toward me in the specific, involuntary sequence of people following the trajectory of a revelation. I sat with my hands flat on the table and my face as still as I could hold it, because I had spent 14 months learning stillness, and it was the only thing I had left that was entirely mine. "The entirety of Mr. Hartwell's estate," Mr. Whitmore continued, "has been placed into a protected, irrevocable trust, established 14 months ago and amended 6 months ago following the finalization of the divorce, and certain information that came to Mr. Hartwell's attention thereafter." Vanessa's posture had gone rigid. Beside her, Marcus Webb had stopped taking notes. "The trust is irrevocably assigned to its sole beneficiary." He said my name, Emily Hartwell, my former name, the name I had given back 4 months ago in a courthouse hallway thinking it was finished. Vanessa stared at him. "That's impossible. I'm his legal wife." "Which is precisely why," Mr. Whitmore replied without blinking. "You receive what the law requires in the absence of an explicit bequest." He turned the page. $1. The word dropped into the silence of that room like a stone into still water. The ripples moved outward. I watched them cross the table, reach Vanessa, reach Marcus Webb, reach the 2 associates seated along the wall who had not expected to witness anything today that they would remember. Vanessa laughed. It came out wrong. Sharp and brittle and entirely unlike her usual laugh, which was warm and controlled and used strategically. This one had no strategy in it. This was the sound a person makes when the architecture of their plan collapses faster than they can process. "This is a joke," she said. "There is a condition," Mr. Whitmore said. Her laughter stopped. "Should the current spouse contest this will or any of its provisions, all statutory entitlements are immediately forfeited." He paused. "Additionally, evidence currently held in escrow and referenced as Appendix C will be released to the appropriate authorities, including the Securities and Exchange Commission and the County District Attorney's Office." The room was so quiet I could hear the ventilation system. Vanessa had gone absolutely still. She knew what Appendix C was. I could see it. The specific quality of her stillness. The difference between the stillness of someone processing information and the stillness of someone who has been confronted with something they recognize. She knew what Daniel had found. Whatever it was, whatever she had done in the 18 months she had been working on him, whatever financial maneuvers or deceptions or pressures had constituted her campaign, she knew what was in that envelope. And she understood what it would mean if it was opened. Her mouth opened. Once, twice, nothing. For the first time in Vanessa's entire life, in 33 years of watching her operate, of watching her charm and take and maneuver and smile her way through every situation that should have stopped her, she had absolutely nothing to say. She stood. Her chair scraped against the floor with the specific, graceless sound of something not done deliberately. She picked up her bag. She did not look at Marcus Webb. She did not look at the associates along the wall. She did not look at Mr. Whitmore. She looked at me for exactly 1 second, and then she walked out. The door closed. The room exhaled. There is something something further?" Mr. Whitmore said. "If you'll remain." The room cleared with the quiet efficiency of professionals who understand when they are no longer needed. Marcus Webb left without speaking. The associates gathered their materials. Richard Okoye stayed beside me, as he had been, steady and silent in the way of someone who is present without being intrusive. Mr. Whitmore waited until the room was empty. Then he reached into the folder and produced a small envelope, not legal stationery. A plain envelope, the kind you buy in a box of 50. With my name written on the outside in handwriting I recognized immediately. Slightly tilted, the capital E with the particular loop Daniel had never outgrown from wherever he'd learned to write it. The ink was uneven, slightly heavier in some places, lighter in others, the handwriting of someone who had started and stopped, who had written under some kind of difficulty. "He asked that this be given to you privately," Mr. Whitmore said. He stood, gathered his folder, and left the room. Richard looked at me. I nodded once. He gave my shoulder a brief, certain pressure and stepped out, leaving the door slightly open behind him. I sat alone at the walnut table with Central Park below the windows and Daniel's envelope in my hands. I held it for a while without opening it. I thought about the secondhand couch, the takeout containers, the investor decks spread across our coffee table at 11 p.m. while he walked me through pivot strategies, and I asked questions I didn't entirely understand, and he explained them with the patience of someone who needed to think out loud and had found, in me, someone willing to listen. I thought about the IPO, the moment it went public, his face when he called me from the office, the specific sound of a man who has just realized that the thing he believed in has been believed in by enough other people to constitute proof. I thought about the kitchen island. I'm not happy. 3 words. 14 months of consequences. I thought about ivory, fitted, plunging neckline, a vineyard in Napa. I opened the envelope. The letter was 1 page. The handwriting matched the envelope. Uneven, effortful, the quality of something written by someone who was not entirely well, which Daniel I now understood had not been for some time. I betrayed you. I can't undo that. But I can make sure my last mistake doesn't destroy what little decency I have left. I spent a year understanding what happened. The understanding came too late. By the time I could see it clearly, what she did, what I let happen, what I was a willing participant in, and what I was something else in, I was already where I was. The details are in Appendix C. I'm not asking you to use them. I'm asking you to have them, because having them means she can never come for what belongs to you. The company was built on what we did together. That's in the record, even if it was never in a title. What I'm leaving you is not a gift. It's a debt I couldn't pay any other way. I'm sorry about all of it. I'm most sorry that I let you believe for a while that you weren't enough. You were the only thing that was. D. I folded the letter. I put it back in the envelope. I looked out at Central Park for a long time, at the November light on the trees, at the geometry of it, the way it sits in the middle of all that city like a held breath. Then I picked up my phone and called Richard. "I'm ready," I said. 6 months later. The estate was substantial. Not the full $412 million. There were taxes and legal structures and the specific complexities of a tech fortune that Richard navigated with the methodical patience of someone who is very good at what he does and is not going to rush it. What came to me was enough. Enough is a word I've been thinking about a lot. Enough to build something. Enough to fund the thing I'd been talking about for 3 years and hadn't had the capital to start. A small consulting firm, helping early-stage companies with the operational infrastructure that the founders, focused entirely on the idea, tend to neglect until it becomes a crisis. The thing I had actually been doing, functionally, for 9 years without a title for it. Richard closed the estate transfer on a Tuesday. I did not celebrate. I went home and made dinner and called my mother and told her it was done. Vanessa did not contest the will. I know this not because she told me, we have not spoken since the conference room, and I am at peace with the possibility that we may not speak again, but because Richard monitored the relevant legal filings for 90 days and nothing appeared. The deadline passed. Appendix C remained sealed, in escrow, with instructions that it would be released to the authorities if any legal challenge was mounted within 5 years. I don't know what's in it. I have thought about whether I want to know. I have decided, for now, that what matters is that she knows it exists and that it holds, and that the holding is sufficient. My therapist, Dr. Sarah Park, told me in a session last month that the thing I was experiencing was not closure, that closure is largely a myth constructed to give grief a shape it doesn't naturally have, but something more like settlement, the particular quality of a thing that has stopped moving. Is it enough? She asked. I thought about it. I'm not sure that's the right question, I said. She looked at me. The right question, I said, is whether I can build something on top of it, whether where I am now is a foundation. She nodded slowly. Is it? I looked at the window of her office, a smaller view than the 32nd floor of Whitmore and Keller, a street-level view of a block in the West Village with a coffee shop and a bookstore, and a woman walking a very large, very serious dog. Yes, I said. I have kept the letter. It's in a plain envelope in the top drawer of my desk at the new office, a space I chose myself, in a building I liked, with windows that get afternoon light. The letter is not there as a reminder of what was taken. It's there as a record of what was true. He loved me when it was difficult. He failed me when it was easy. At the end of something, he found what decency he had left and he aimed it at me. That's not a love story, but it's not nothing either. Vanessa is, I don't entirely know. I have heard, through the specific information osmosis of people who know people who know people, that she is in negotiations of some kind, that the question of what she did and what she knew and what Appendix C contains has not been entirely contained by the will's provisions, because certain information information, once it has moved through the world, does not stay neatly in envelopes. But that is not my story to tell. That is hers. Mine is this. I was in a room on the 32nd floor when a lawyer said my former name, and the ground shifted under someone who had spent her life standing on things that belonged to other people. And for one moment before she recovered herself and walked out and became someone else's problem, I watched her understand that the world had been arranged incorrectly all along, not against her, against me, and it had finally, quietly corrected itself.